Hi, welcome to Seaside Quilting Tutorials. My name is Terry, and today we're going to talk about how to hang our quilt blocks, wall hangings, and quilts. It was a mystery to me for a long time on how to hang those things. You know, you'd make these beautiful quilts and you can't put them all on the back of your couch or on your beds. You run out of room. And so I had asked a friend years ago, how do you hang yours? And she said, well, I just buy packages of pre-made quilt sleeves. When you saw the price on those packages, they were pretty darn expensive. And so I was like, forget about that. And then a few years ago, I realized, looking at another friend's quilts, how she was doing hers, and I was amazed, and she showed me how to do a couple different ways on hanging those things. And so that's what we're going to do today. We're going to take a look at how we make our own sleeves and some tabs to put on the tops of our wall hangings and our quilt blocks so that we can hang them up and make our sewing room look pretty and, show off our stuff throughout our house. So let's go ahead and do that. I have some of these cute little hangers that I got in from Seaside Quilting Supplies. They've got quite a few different kinds. Some really beautiful ones. I can't show them all right now because many of them are hung up. But this is just a couple of them, and we're going to take a look at how do we get our quilt blocks on them. Because I often make extra quilt blocks or trade quilt blocks in different groups, and I like to be able to hang those things up. So let's take a look. So I have this small quilt block. I think it came out to about 6.5 inches, or around about 6 inches finished. And so I put a little binding around it. I didn't put a border on this one because I want to be able to hang it up on one of the smaller quilt block hangers. And so let's take a look at how to make a sleeve for that. And making a sleeve for that will be the same exact way that you would make a sleeve for a quilt or for a wall hanging, depending on what you want to be able to hang up. So the first thing that you'll do is you'll measure the back of your quilt or your block or your wall hanging, whichever one you're working on to hang up. So you'll just go ahead and measure that. And I'm just taking a guess at what the measurement is. So yeah, this one's a 6 inch. So you just take a piece of fabric. Now it depends on what size of a rod or a hanger you're going to be hanging it on. So I've cut my fabric kind of small for this one, and I'm going to trim it down. Well, no, I got to fold my edges, so I think I've got it about right. And you would make a line. We'll do the line afterward, after we've made our little sleeve. So to make your sleeve, we're going to sew this so that it's into a sleeve. That made a lot of sense, right? Oh my goodness. It's still kind of early in the morning for me. I was up doing orders from the live last night. So please excuse me. I'm going to get my iron warmed up so we can do this and press it. So the first thing that I do is you want to make sure that you got straight edges for your sides. So I'm going to trim this a little bit. There. That's a little straighter, so it'll make a nicer fold. I've got thread hanging on me and everything today. Okay, so I'm just going to fold my edges over about 1/4 of an inch on each end of what's going to be my sleeve. And I usually do a matching fabric, but if you're hanging it up, no one's going to see the back of your quilt or your block or whatever, so it doesn't have to match. If you've run out of fabric for it, that's fine. You can really use any fabric. And as a matter of fact, most people, when they make the sleeves, use just a cheaper muslin, like you would use to practice blocks, or the fashion designers that use muslin to create different wardrobes before they use their good fabric. That muslin works perfectly well to make a sleeve with. I just happen to have a little bit of what I used for my binding and my backing on this one. I didn't have the muslin because this block I made, probably about 25 or so years ago, quite a long time ago anyways, and I've had it with me for quite a while. And I decided that since I have some of these smaller hangers, I want to be able to hang it up. So you're going to fold it 1/4 of an inch, and then you're going to fold it another 1/4 of an inch. And we're going to do that on both sides. I'm not exactly, perfectly measuring the exact 1/4 of an inch. I do a 1/4 of an inch on so many things now that I can almost guess a 1/4 of an inch. Since this is going on the back of my quilt, I'm not overly fussy about it. The nice thing about a sleeve for the back of a quilt or a wall hanging is that, say you've made a wall hanging out of a table runner design, and later on you would like to use it as a table runner, no one's going to see that sleeve on the back side. But if it's on a quilt and you ever want to take it off, it's easy just to take your seam ripper and remove it. So then, once you have both sides folded with your 1/4 of an inch and pressed, we're just going to do a quick stitch down each side just to hold that in place. Get rid of that tape measure out of my way. Got to get my machine set up to sew. Usually I do that ahead of time. Okay. So you just go ahead, and I'm using my 1/4 inch guide foot. Excuse me. And I'm just going to move my stitching over a couple dashes so that I'm catching the very edge of that stitching. And you can just use a straight stitch, that's fine too. I even have the wrong color thread in by mistake, but that's fine. It's just going on the back. Okay, so I've stitched both sides. And actually having that will help you to see, the wrong thread will help you to see what I'm doing. I'm just gonna, sorry, my allergies are bugging me. Everything's starting to grow outside and my allergies kick in. Starting to get a lot of pollen out there. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing to the top and the bottom of this. We're going to fold it 1/4 of an inch, and then another 1/4 of an inch, and the same on the bottom. Now yours will fold a little easier than mine. Just because I'm using a linen fabric and it's a little bit heavier. It's just what I had on that looked similar to muslin, so that it would almost match my muslin, because I didn't have any muslin in hand right now. Or I couldn't find my muslin, really. I know I've got some on a shelf someplace. But of course, at the moment that I needed it, I wasn't able to find it. And I'm going to go ahead and sew that bottom across. The end of mine is a little thicker, so it does not want to stitch at the moment. Now, if you're using the regular muslin, it's not going to be thick on the end. And it's just that this is so thin, it doesn't want to go through. I have to grab my awl and push that through a little bit so I can get it started. Or maybe it won't let me this morning. Kitty's trying to come and visit me while I'm working. She thinks she's my supervisor. I'm just going to tidy that up a little bit where my needle got stuck and sewed too many times. Of course, none of this is going to matter. Like I said, it's going to be on the back of my quilt. No one's going to see it but me. It's just there to hang it up. But I'll trim some of that off anyways. And then I'm going to do the bottom side. And I made this a little wider than I really needed it to be. It could have been even smaller than this. I just took a scrap from what I was using for the binding on the block. And you'll see this is so easy to do for any of your stuff to get it hung up. And I really like this for quilts, because I do like to hang my quilts up in my living room and in the bedrooms. I just think it makes the rooms look nice and cozy, and people get to see some of the stuff that I do. If I have one on the back of my couch, but my cat lays on it all the time, and it's made specifically for her for that purpose. So I don't put any of my nicer ones on the back of my couch. I figure anything that is down at their level is free access to them. Okay, now we're just going to sew a seam on here, if it will get in here nicely for me. Like I said, with regular cotton, It's not going to be this thick on the ends and give you as much trouble as it's given me. And I think there's some kind of a rule that if you're filming something so that you can show it to somebody, it's going to give you a problem anyway. Sort of one of those Murphy Law type things. Okay, now that that's all done, you're just going to flip your piece over, whether it's a block, a quilt, a wall hanging, whatever it is. You're going to flip it over, and then I just take a ruler and make a straight line across. I don't need a very big ruler since this is a block, but if this was a quilt, I would set it up so that I measure so many inches down from the bottom and make some marks across with probably something that is air, like I like to use my air removable marking pens. That way, you know, over time those marks just go away for me. Or you could use chalk even. And I would make a mark across. I'm not going to because this is such a small block, but I'm just showing you if you were doing it on something a little bigger where you want your line to be straight. So you'd make your top line. And then I just would lay my sleeve across and kind of get my ruler set up so I know where that bottom is going to need to be stitched on. And then take that out of the way and then make my next mark. But as you can see, this one's going to lay here pretty well. Then I just take a needle and thread. And so that I'm going to tuck this back under. I know it looks like it's hard to get that needle in there, and it's because it's a tougher linen that I use for napkins and wall hangings and stuff. So I'm going to get my knot up under there where it's hidden. And actually I'm going to bring that back down out of so it's at the bottom. I just wanted to get my stitching, if this will cooperate with me today. So I have my thread started, and it's right at the, I had it at the right end, mind you. Oh my goodness, what is wrong with me today? Well, I know that thread's in there where I need it to be real good. So I'm going to lay it across where my line was. And I'm going to catch just a couple stitches below my piece. So I'll catch just a couple stitches. And I'm going to come up into my sleeve and catch that as well. Like a little whip stitch. Now you could whip stitch this all the way across. It doesn't have to be fancy because it's on the back. No one's going to see it but you. But if you want to hide your thread as you're sewing, you can just poke your needle down through this part on your sleeve. And this linen I knew was going to give me a little trouble today, but you can just move your needle down through. This isn't really tight up against my block yet. And you would catch a couple more stitches, you know, right underneath it, and then come up through that piece, like so. And like I said, you could do a whip stitch all the way through. I'm not going to sew this whole piece on right now, but you get the idea. It's just a matter of hand stitching across the top and then hand stitch across the bottom. But on blocks, I'll show you what I do. Because I know that I don't care if I ever take this off. I use permanent fabric glue. And of course my fabric glue didn't want to come out. It's just a block that I'm going to hang up. You don't want to get it in the actual sleeve part. So I'm just going to run my finger across it and make sure that it stays onto the sleeve itself, because I want to leave that opening so it's not glued down, of course. And just put a thin layer of fabric glue across the top and the bottom. Now this is permanent fabric glue. You don't want to make a mistake and use your temporary fabric glue, because if you ever do need to wash it, you want it to be able to wash and have your sleeve stay on there and not have to put another sleeve on. And you could use a toothpick or whatever to get your glue on there. And I've left my opening so that it's going to stay open and not glue down, hopefully. Okay, so now that I have my fabric glue on there, I'm just going to turn this around. I'm going to make sure that it's straight. I'm going to press it down. And then I'm going to press it with my iron, because I need it to dry faster. You don't necessarily have to iron it. You could just put something on there to hold it down in place. But so that I can show you, I want to get that dried. And I'm going to let this dry for a couple minutes. I just wanted to get some heat on it to speed it up a little bit. Okay, so we'll set that aside for a few minutes, let that dry. And I'll show you the next way that we're going to be able to hang them up. Now the sleeve works perfectly fine, and I'll show you after that's dried a little bit. It works perfectly fine to slip onto these, because you can push your split pieces forward a little bit and slip your one side of your sleeve on. With these, your sleeve has to pretty much equal the bottom of this to put it on. So that's one variance with these little ones. Now many of your larger ones that come with a dowel make it a little bit easier, because your sleeve can slip right onto it. There are also some that come with built-in clips, and you wouldn't even need a sleeve or a pocket. You can just clip the ends and it works perfectly fine. Now that should be setting while I'm showing you this next way. And I thought I had a piece of fabric. Let me see. Okay, so we're going to make some tabs that we add to the top of our quilt block. And you can do this as well for table, for wall hangings or for quilts that you want to hang up. The size across of your tabs that you're going to need will depend on the weight of what you're hanging up. Let me get this down where you can see. So since this is just a block, I don't need my tabs to be very wide. It's not holding a lot of weight. And pretty much the same with a wall hanging. Most wall hangings aren't very heavy, but if they are, you might want to go with tabs that are about 1 inch wide for a wall hanging. For a quilt, you might even go to tabs that are 2 to 3 inches wide and spread them out equally. And I'll show you how we're going to attach these tabs after we've made them. I just need my turner so I can show you. How this will work. Now, whatever size tab you're going to make, and you'll see what I mean by tabs. If you're not understanding me right now, that's totally fine. I get it. But depending on what width you're going to make these, you want to make sure that you're leaving 1/4 of an inch on each end. So that would be a 1/2 inch extra, and whatever your width is going to be. So if you wanted your width to be 2 inches, you would cut your strips 2.5 inches, and so forth. And on some quilts, I've even done like 3-inch tabs because they were very big quilts going across the entire wall. So then you're going to take and you're going to press this right sides together, just like as if you were doing binding. Now, once you have that done, then you're just going to do 1/4 of an inch seam going down the raw edge. And I actually have the right color thread in for this one. Now I just made one long piece, and I'm going to cut it after because it's not going to matter that it has raw edges. We don't need to bother with sewing either of the bottoms. It's totally fine. And then I have these turners, different sizes, for these, if I'm making straps for different things. And you're just going to push it onto your little turner. And I can't remember the name of what you call these. I was trying to think of it this morning. I was like, what is the official name for these? I just think of it as a turner. But if you're interested in these and you don't have them yet, just let us know at Seaside Quilting Supplies. We have these available. One package comes with several different, not several, but like 3 or 4 different sizes of turners. And I'll know what you mean if you go to order them. So I have it on here. I'm trying to make sure that you're being able to see. I've already pushed my plastic piece in through that sleeve. And I'm just going to take this metal piece. A couple of them, there's wooden dowels that you push it down with. And so you're just going to push that inside. And it can be a little tricky getting it started, pushing down through. Especially since I didn't sew my bottom. If I sew my bottom, it goes down through a lot easier. But you just keep pushing that through until it comes out the other side. And once it's coming out the other end, I still have this part that I'm holding on to up here, and I was pushing it down through. And now I've got a piece that's poking down through the end. And I'm just going to take a hold of that piece, and I'm going to pull it through. So now my right side is on the outside of my piece. And then I just use that dowel and I poke it inside all the way through. And what I want to do is I want to get my seam flattened out so that when I go to press it, so I just kind of pull down and let that go on top of my dowel. And I just pull it down and it flattens out my seam for me, because otherwise it's a pain to get these pressed. And then I'm going to lay this down, and I want my seam, as soon as I find, oh, there we go. I want my seam to lay about in the middle of the back of this. And I'm just finger pressing it. Put the camera just a little bit better so you can see what I'm doing here. So I'm just going to finger press it. I've got my seam going down. It's hard to see it, but I've got my seam going down so it's in the back, or in the middle rather. It will be the back of my tab, so to speak. And then I'm just going to press that. And then I'm just going to fold this in half at the top, and I'm going to figure about how big do I want these to be. So you would take whatever dowel or whatever you're going to hang it on. So if I'm going to hang it on, if I'm going to use this and hang it on this, I'm just wanting to make sure that I've got enough room for that to go on and slip across. I can let it hang a little bit lower than that if I want. Oh my goodness, I didn't get that in the camera. So basically I'm just trying to figure out if this is going to be long enough to go on here. And then I would cut it, and then I would make more. And you, for a small one like this, you only need a tab that's going to go on one side and one that's going to go on your other side. And those slip on easy. Now, if you're going across a dowel that's 12 inches, you might want to do either 2 or 3 of these little tabs. And so you just stick your dowel through and figure out, is that going to slip through my tabs easily? And then I know that that's going to be long enough. The other consideration, oh no, that'll be fine because it's going to be at the top. Never mind what I was just thinking. Now, since I also use this for a quilt, and this is what I mean by a tab. It's just, I don't know if there's another official name for it, but that's what I call it. I just call it a tab. So if you were doing this so that you were going to hang a quilt onto a rod that's, say, like about 1/2 inch in diameter or 1 inch in diameter, depends on the rod that you're going to hang up. Usually I just use curtain hanger rods up on my wall. You can get really nice, cute, fancy ones or regular ones, and I just hang them up on my wall to hang my quilts, and I make either these or I do the sleeve. And you just need to figure out the diameter and how much you need to push through there. So if this was going to go on something wider around, I would make it longer so that I have enough room to get it over what I'm going to put it on. And I would, if I was doing a quilt, I would make this wider as well. So it just depends on what you're putting it on. So I cut my first one the length that I'm going to need it while it's folded in half. So I didn't need it very long. And then I'm just going to lay it on top of my longer one. And then I'll trim and I'll make one more. So I have 2 of equal size. Like so. Stick my rod over there so it doesn't escape from me. So then, as you're putting your binding on, I've already started my binding on this one. You want to decide which is the top side of what you're hanging. So whether it's a quilt or it's a block or whatever, you just want to decide what is going to be the top of this. And I've already started coming around the corner of my binding. So I'm going to attach, I'm just going to fold this in half again. I want my seam to be on the inside of this. And then I'm going to lay it. Okay, so the half circle, you know, this side that's the finished side is going to be laying down like so. Get my camera adjusted so you're seeing me well. So this is going to be laying down, and I'm going to do it, I'm going to measure this so I can get both sides equal. So I'm just going to measure across my top, and I've got this, so it's going to be right at my 2-inch mark, and I'm going to pin that in place. And then I'm going to do the same with the other one. Oops, that's my binding, not my tab. I'm just going to fold my other tab in half. Like so. And the raw edges are going to go with the raw edges of my block. And I'm going to measure over. And I'm going to set this one down at the same distance across on the top. And you want to try to make sure that these are laying very well on top of each other, so you won't have them sewn down so that they look like this, because then they look kind of funky. I like to have them laying nice and neat on top of each other when I go to sew them. And I'm going to pin this one down. And this is kind of the same way that you would put straps on a apron or a bag or whatever from your top. So now I've got both of those in place. I'm going to continue to do my binding across. So let me move you a little bit closer. And I've got to put that back to the 1/4 of an inch. And so typically, I sew my binding to the back of my piece, and then I'm going to flip it over. And you'll see how the tabs work out when you flip it over. Now when I get close to where that pin is, and I know that I've grabbed onto my tabs, so I'm holding it down in place, I can slip that pin out, and I just hold them from this bottom side so it stays nice and flat while I'm sewing across. And I'm going to sew all the way across for my binding until I get to the other side. when I'm close again to the pin, I'm going to take the pin out. You don't want to hit the pin with your needle, because if you break your needle, it's not a good thing. It's not good for your machine. So you go ahead and you'll finish your binding all the way around. And I'll show you how that's going to work. Now once you're all finished with your binding, forgot to clip my threads. Once you're all finished with your binding, you'll have these cute tabs at the very top to be able to hang your block or your quilt with. And these blocks are a great way to practice your binding. This is how I practiced my binding, with blocks that were about 12 inches, 16 inches. Just made it a lot easier. If it's too small, like a pot holder, it can be a little frustrating. But I find that working with a block makes it kind of nice. Once you're all done, you just take the rod and you'll just slip it through. Whoops. You just slip it through each end. And then hang it back on your hanger. Get it adjusted on there the way that you want it. Okay, I wanted to get this up here so that you can see it well. So now you can see that you have your hanger and you have your wall hanging, or your block. It could be a wall hanging that hangs longer. And you can do this with quilts as well, on larger dowels, of course. But yeah, I think that's pretty darn cute. So last night during the live, I was telling everybody that I had made something for Mary for her kitchen. And when I was making this block, I had some different pieces that were extra of the lavender fabric that we have in. And so I used the all over together lavender for the back and for the tabs and the binding. And I used one of the pieces that I fussy cut a little bit and used some of our other purple fabrics. I hope she's gonna like it. And for our other one, this should be dry now. This one is the one that I had planned to hang on this smaller hanger in my cute little sewing room. I think it will go well with my walls. And so this is the one that I put the sleeve on. And I could have put a sleeve on the other one and put it across the dowel as well. It would have worked perfectly fine. And just to show you how that would work out. Now you would imagine this was a larger block, of course. But you just slip your dowel right through. Now remember, I used my glue, and my glue hasn't really totally set yet, so it's almost set, but not quite. But that's how it would work if I had put it on a dowel, and if it was longer across. And you can do the same thing and hang it. Now if I'm putting it on this smaller split one, you just kind of, not real hard, but just easily push one of your sides through and slip one side on like that. And then I just kind of push my piece over so I can get that other side of the split into it and just carefully ease it across. Now, I probably should have put my pocket a little bit higher, so since it's not completely dry yet, I will probably move that pocket up a little bit more so it's not hiding the bottom part of this as much. But this was just to show you how you would hang it on a split one. And I think that's going to be pretty cute too. We're just going to have to fix that pocket. Well, I hope that you've enjoyed this tutorial. I hope that it's helped you to see how you can hang your quilts, your blocks, and your wall hangings. So I'm Terry, and this is from Seaside Quilting Tutorials. If you've enjoyed this tutorial and it's been helpful for you, please take a moment and subscribe to Seaside Quilting Tutorials on YouTube. And like this video, and right next to the subscribe button there is a little bell, and if you click on that bell and switch it to all, whenever one of our tutorials comes up, you'll get a little notification. And pretty soon I'm going to be doing one just on binding, and I'm going to be doing one on how to do flange binding, which is really cute on items. You have a good day. Happy sewing.